Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you, first off, for being with us here this afternoon for this press conference related to the two-day visit by the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, related specifically to the situation of Roma and Sinti here in Hungary. As you are likely aware from the advisory for this event, the visit has included high-level meetings with ODIHR Director Michael and members of the Hungarian government, as well as a visit to the city of Miskolci, which was earlier today. So on the outcome and basically on the visit so far, I hand the mic to Michael to tell you about that.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending our press conference today. It is indeed, of course, it shows a lot of interest, of course, your presence here. We thank you for your interest, and we will distribute at the end of the press conference a written, also press release, certainly not covering everything, which we will now have in the Q&A, but covering the main points in our visit. And let me also say that, of course, we have the intention, but this will take some weeks or months, of course, also to make a report on this visit. This has to be well prepared for, especially, but today, of course, we can share with you our main impressions we had yesterday and today. And as our spokesperson, Tom Reimer, said, we had indeed very good, I have to say, fruitful discussions with the government yesterday, with Minister Barok. We had a very, very interesting, and I also think fruitful visit to Miskolci. We had discussions with not only, of course, the self-government, Roma minority self-government representatives and the Roma civil rights movement of Miskolci, but also certainly with the deputy mayor and his aides, touching upon all the issues, of course, under discussion in Miskolci. But why is ODIHR doing that? ODIHR, as an institution in the OSCE, which is dealing with the topic of protection, inclusion of the rights of Roma and Sinti, is tasked since 2003, so quite a long time already, in the action plan on Roma and Sinti to assume, I quote, a proactive role in analyzing measures undertaken by participating states. So it is not something, of course, we have imagined what we could do. It is one of our regular activities, and I'm happy to share that with you, because usually ODIHR, many people think ODIHR that is about electoral observation or human rights observation in general. No, it is especially also about the action plan on Roma and Sinti in the whole of the OSCE area. Today on the podium with me is Miriam Gavali, our head of department for this very important topic. Maybe she can also, in the Q&A after my remarks, also enter into the answering part together with me. So it is a current task that we have, and in the framework of this, of course, this visit also to Hungary has to be seen. Therefore, I want to remind that OSCE commitments, our common rules in the OSCE, via the 2003 Action Plan on Roma and Sinti, oblige the participating states, including, of course, Hungary and all others, to implement effective anti-discrimination legislation to combat racial and ethnic discrimination in all fields, including housing. This was today, this visit is also a follow-up visit to a previous ODIHR visit to Hungary in 2009 to assess the human rights situation of Roma in the country, with a focus on the escalation of violence and attacks against Roma in Hungary prior to the visit. We express appreciation for Hungary's engagement and cooperation with ODIHR, including, and in addition to this visit, ODIHR's periodical reporting on the implementation of Roma-related commitments, as well as teaching about and commemorating Roma genocide in the Second World War. We would like to inform you that since last year, ODIHR has been monitoring the situation of Roma in Miskolci. and engaging in communication with Hungarian authorities on that matter. This two-day visit therefore focused on assessing the current human rights situation of Roma in Hungary, especially the recent developments with regard to social inclusion policies targeting Roma, in particular in the areas of education, employment and housing, as well as the situation regarding security concerns, anti-campaigns and hate speech. I told you, of course, already about our partners who we met both in Budapest and in Miskolci. For us, the main results, which I want to summarize briefly, you will find them also in the press release, but let me summarize them before we come to your questions. For us, the main point to make today, and the main results for the time being, is that we call upon the Hungarian authorities, and particularly on the local level leadership, to take a stronger role in implementing social inclusion policies and promote equal rights and opportunities, including for Roma. Then the local and national authorities, and here we know, especially after seeing today in the settlement called the numbered streets, that the local authorities have really a responsibility to assume. These authorities, they have to provide to the vulnerable Roma communities sustainable and non-discriminatory housing solutions. We would like to underline, therefore, that integrated housing solutions can also support desegregation in education. Another topic which developed at all educational matters during our visit, where we have touched, as well as with Minister Balog, but also today in the talks in Miskolci, how further steps can be made in this area. This very desegregation in education. We would like to remind also, as one other result, that in the provision of social housing, authorities must adhere to OSCE commitments prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race or ethnicity, what some call ethical profiling, and international human rights standards on the right to adequate housing. We would like to share our concerns that, unless immediately addressed, discriminatory and exclusive measures by local authorities in the area of housing might set a dangerous precedent and set a negative example for other areas. Welcome, of course, that is something we have to very clearly say, a welcome from our side. We have noted the very important recent judgment of the Hungarian Supreme Court of the Curia in May, and the report of the Hungarian Commissioner for Fundamental Human Rights, the Ombudsman, on the measures undertaken by the local council regarding the housing provided to Roma residents of Miskolci. This is a very important clarification, and we call on all authorities, both local and national, where it not happened until now, to immediately address these rulings and the findings of these two institutions, both the Ombudsman and certainly the Supreme Court, and implement their recommendations, and especially prevent that things like that happen again. You know, this is mostly also about the very, very complicated question of when compensation is being offered for moving out of the area of the numbered streets, but of course in connection to moving outside of the city limits. This has, and I think it's very important that it has been declared illegal by the Supreme Court. This was an important clarification. Now, of course, more follow-up is needed. Therefore, in the end, it is about providing adequate and sustainable solutions without discrimination in housing, in education, and in all other areas of civil life. Here, of course, on all these issues, our report will touch base in a more detailed way. We will remain in contact, of course, certainly with the national and the local level in order to concretize our findings. And now I will be happy to share with you, of course, the time for the discussion. Please feel free to raise your questions.
Yes, so with questions, I'll just ask you to raise your hands, please. Before you ask your question, if you will have a microphone, sorry, if you raise your hands, we'll have a microphone brought around to you. Before you ask your question, if you could just give your name and the media outlet for which you're working.
Thank you, Andrew Byrne from the Financial Times. I'm just curious, I mean, you mentioned one of your statements in the statements about the possibility that the actions taken by local authorities in Miskolci could set a negative precedent or example. I'm not sure which term you used. Could you elaborate on those concerns, and if you've seen evidence or have concerns that authorities elsewhere in Hungary or in other countries may be adopting a similar approach to social inclusion in housing?
Well, certainly, of course, all over, in all places, of course, it is always a negative precedent when you have, after a collecting of signatures, of over 35,000 signatures in Miskolci, where people were being called to sign a list where they called with their signature for abolishing slums, and then they suddenly discovered that one of the, even their own housing areas is being concerned of that. I think that is a bad example. Therefore, I think it is important to see this residential area of the so-called unnumbered streets. To see it, we have been there today, and we did see, of course, well, what I, in my terms, would certainly not call a slum. Because it is a residential area, certainly, of course, where some development, refurbishment is needed as in many places, but it is, of course, certainly an area where people, sometimes they know over 70 or 80 years, are living, and rightly questioning why should they leave. We don't interfere in urban planning, that is not our job. But when we have the impression that urban planning is mixed with ethnical or racial questions, then we have to raise them, because we don't want this to be repeated, either in Miskolci or wherever. And we hope, let me say that, we hope that solutions will be found on the place in close cooperation between the city societies and the self-organization of the Roma in Miskolci, because that is how it, also according to the Hungarian law, should work. There are elected representatives of the Roma self-government. We know that the dialogue between the city municipalities and the elected self-government has been, or even is still, let's put it like that, challenging. And thanks to, for example, organizations like the Malteser, who help in promoting this dialogue, this can happen, but a direct dialogue would certainly be demanded. All this, of course, underlines that there is ample space for improvement of the situation, and we hope very much that a positive solution, in the interest of these people living there, with their families, since over 60, 70 years, will be found.
You just, at the very start, you said that you had a fruitful discussion with Minister Bollock. What fruit can you tell us about? What actually happened, or anything concrete from that discussion? Also, did you meet the mayor of Miskolci? And if not, why not? Is there a reason you didn't meet Mayor Kriza? Thirdly, is there any sort of positive signal or sign that you see that there will actually be steps towards a positive solution in Miskolci, rather than hope?
Unfortunately, we did not meet the mayor personally. We did meet his deputy. We did meet the commissioner for especially these questions and also this housing area appointed by the municipality, and the deputy police chief. This was from the side of the authorities, the local authorities. When I said fruitful in the meeting with Minister Bollock, I especially want to underline that I had the impression, of course, that, for example, also in the minister's role in trying to facilitate the situation, bringing people to the table, I think these are positive movements, and these are indeed positive steps. Also the minister in trying to bring the Malteser, for example, there, in facilitating the situation that can help. But the fruit, of course, in this case does not mean that the whole thing is settled. We touched yesterday also about questions how we can further cooperate, for example, on how ODIHR can train law enforcement officials. It's something we do very much, of course, in many countries in the OSCE area, in training law enforcement officials, police, for example, on respect of human rights when promoting security. Our approach is, when doing security, is always a human rights-based approach, a human rights-centered approach. Therefore, we train, we offer to participating states, and that was what I was talking yesterday with the minister, we offer instruments how we can train law enforcement officials to actively deal, protect, and implement human rights when dealing, of course, with security situations. That is part of our standard exercise we are doing. And we have, we will here make concrete proposals to the Hungarian government for project cooperation in that area, because we think it would indeed be, of course, good and welcome, of course, to have this. For the time being, when it comes to the numbered streets, it is only hope. Because right now, we have seen today that one house that was already being demolished there. We have seen the hope in the eyes of the inhabitants, and we have seen also the many, of course, we have talked with people who already had to leave and now are living in other houses, or sometimes without any compensation, which was also happening. We have seen, of course, the situation which is far from satisfying. Therefore, we hope that there will be, in a dialogue on the spot between the authorities and civil society organizations and the Roma self-government, a solution, of course, hopefully also with the help of the national level, because certainly, of course, this is something which is being watched in the OSCE. But the first address here, the first place to address that is on the local level, and then, of course, we hope that a solution can be found, maybe even to maintain this area, this settlement, because if you see it, you see that it's really a unique settlement of high urban value, I think also of architectural value. Certainly it is old, yes, but it stands for something, it has a tradition, and therefore, of course, it would be good to find a solution to find it, and we will closely follow the situation also in the future.
Follow-up, did you ask to meet the mayor? He said no, or he wasn't available, or nothing?
We as always, of course, we asked to meet the city authorities, and the authorities themselves decide, of course, who is available. But you can be sure that we that we will also in the future make our points very clear, because what we say, we don't say it only to the mayor or to the deputy or to the police chief, we say it to the authority as a whole, and that is why we will also now continue to work on that in preparing our report, which will certainly then, of course, later on also be published. Because our principle is always in our reports we are doing, of course, to be and to publicize them.